I am asked a couple of questions about this film because there is no shortage of opinion in the violence in the Middle East, in the Arab and the Israeli-Palestinian Jewish conflict. So I'm always asked, which side am I on? And the next thing I'm asked is, how did you find the only 3 people that work nonviolent in the Middle East? Because I'm very challenged by their story. The first person affected by, making a film like this are the filmmakers. And it's a privilege. The difference about making a documentary film, and I love both. I have both narrative films and the documentary films. The thing that I love the most about a documentary film is that you are embedded, if you will, with your subject. So to be in the West Bank, to stay in the refugee camps, to have dinner with the Muslim families, to be invited to the Seder dinner on the Israeli side, to sit across from them and to share, and to see the incredible humanity in both is just a very moving thing. And they have these questions. Oh, you're going over to the other side. Are you going to be safe? Well, it's funny because both sides say that. and in my heart, I go, man, if you could just come over with me, I know that you would see that this was something different than what you're experiencing. And I know that also, this thing about film and this thing about conflicts is that the reason why I'm asked which side I'm on is because too often a film or any sort of communication can be viewed as just another shell in the war, if you will, just another tool to fight with. And although I knew that this subject would definitely bring out strong emotions, I mean, if you are Israeli, you have strong emotions about this. If you're Palestinian or Muslim, you have an equally strong set of emotions around this. And chances are every one of us knows someone, that's associated with that, and we have some feelings about it. So I just have to accept that, well, we're just going to take some blows kind of when we make this film. But these people that are doing it, well, they're taking their blows too. I mean, if you see, and that's another thing I wanted to do. I didn't use an announcer. I didn't use an expert. I didn't pit, this politician against that politician or this historian against that historian because I didn't really want it to be about who was right and who was wrong. I really wanted to say, okay, here are 3 people that represent the 3 sides that grew up with the conflict. They didn't found it. It was their grandfathers and their fathers. What did it look like to them, and what does the solution look like to them, and can we as human beings learn something from that? And I think film is a wonderful medium to invite you into that. I'm not trying to sell anybody on a point of view. I'm not trying to add another weapon in the war. I'm really hope that you can look at these human beings, see their story, and take it for what it's worth. I mean, if it speaks to you, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I know the price that they're paying. I know the price that they're paying. And in the United States, it's so funny for me to come into it. They had referenced Dr. King. They had referenced, the civil rights movement that came from them, not from me. And it was something that inspired them. And it's really because of this idea of equality. I mean, no, you can't really compare, 2 sides at war to a civil rights movement per se. You really can't. And I don't mean to maybe lay that on too thick in the film. What you can compare is their empathy to saying, well, we are equal human beings. What would it mean to be seen as an equal human being? And what can that look like kind of for both sides? And that's why they draw the inspiration. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about it, of course. I mean, Malcolm X and Dr. King were contemporaries. They only met once in New York. Malcolm X didn't have a very high opinion of Dr. King. He thought he was a collaborator. He thought he was working with the white man and marginalizing and sort of normalizing this, relational thing. And people working on violence in the Middle East on the Palestinian side, as you saw from Sammy, they encountered the same thing. So there are similarities that they're drawing and that I wanted the audience to think about. They certainly caused me to think about it. Now, because it is an issue and because this panel, and you shouldn't have gave this to me first. No, I'm going to give it up, really. But the panel, on faith and film, I was kind of, gun shy about that a little bit because I do bring faith into film, but it's because I believe it's just part of the human condition. I believe it's part of humanity, and I think it's when it's done in a way that is insightful, that is toward a greater good, or that shares something that you as an audience experience. That's interesting. Then I think it works really well, just like faith in a culture works well that way. But I think whenever it's us versus them, and whenever it's trying to sell you something, or trying to, say this is what you should believe, then I think, it falls apart. It falls apart for me, it falls apart for the audience, and it falls apart for filmmakers that are trying to explore what legitimate human connections there are. Film is a nonlinear element. It can bring insight. That's what it can do. I found tremendous insight from these men. I was challenged. I'm still challenged. I mean, I'm going to go home tonight. It's going to be nice. Ahmad is going to sleep in the refugee camp where his dad was born, and where his dad died, and where his son is still sick and he can't get help for. And also, one last thing. I was invited down to Arizona because they had a conference on religion and conflict. And it was pretty much a atheist group that was there, a very much of a humanist group, secular humanity group. And their argument was pretty compelling, because they said, look at the conflict in the world. I mean, if you look at faith being an excuse, or let's say you're traumatized by 9/11, well, on the other side, if the pilot or the people hijacking the plane think, I'm going to paradise, line up the virgins for me if I hit that building. I mean, faith contributed in a twisted sort of way to a very inhuman thing. And I think that happens across any religion. It happens across anything, Christianity as well. So as a filmmaker, if you're going to explore faith, you're going to have to just be honest. You're just going to have to say, well, what does this look like to the other? And can you understand the other? Is there something about your faith that unites you and the other in a common question, that brings a common insight? Then I think it's very welcome. Actually, I think audiences, no matter who you are, you like that experience. But I think if you come across somehow, even in a subtle way, maybe you don't even mean to, but you're not realizing that they're seeing faith as it's expressed around the world as a divisive element. They're seeing it as a way to excuse inhuman behavior. They're seeing it as a way to arm and defend something that isn't worth defending. And I think if you get caught up into that and you say, well, I got to defend, and oh, this is what, I got to be an apologetic or something, then, well, you can do that, but be a preacher. I mean, be a reporter, do it. But if you're a filmmaker, say it's a metaphor, what is common here? What can we explore? And be honest about it. Be honest when it's working, and be honest when it isn't working. And you don't have to be fearful about that, where that sits. I believe, and I've seen faith be an incredibly strong motivator across the entire human condition. I've seen humanity rise to some of the greatest things that they've ever accomplished. Dr. King I'm sorry, guy, he's absolutely amazing. He challenges me. This nonviolence, I'm going to overcome evil without using evil in return. Well, what does that mean with my wife? What does it mean with my dog? I mean, what does it mean, between us, any human being on a human level? I'm very challenged by that. I love those questions. I think film and the arts need to explore that. They need to help us understand it. They need to help us see when it's healthy, and they need to help us see when it's messed up. And a filmmaker doesn't have to be afraid of that. You can embrace it, as long as you're honest. But I think anytime you're going to hit the hypocrisy button, or the sensitivities of an audience, you're going to run into some walls, and I think you should. So, hey, thank you very much. I hope you got a lot out of the movie, and I'll turn this over to the rest of the panel.
Well, thank you. And Jim was actually the first person to email back when we invited him. He's like, well, what is the point of having this Films of Faith panel? And that is exactly the point. And so thank you. And this is Brent Green. And Brent, one thing that I'm curious about, in addition to whatever you want to say, is you've chosen, both of your last films have been international. And what are the challenges with that, and why have you chosen to do that specifically?
Okay, great. I'm going to stay seated if that's okay. I did a film called Paper Flower. It was a short film that played earlier today. And it's a story of two girls growing up in Tokyo, and they both kind of face traumatizing situations in their life, and they're forced to look at kind of what is real love and what's the value of their self. And it's a narrative film, and it's kind of set against a backdrop of injokosai. Injokosai is a Japanese term for compensated dating or prostitution. So this is an issue that we read about in a CNN Asia article. It was just really intrigued to kind of explore what that looked like in a narrative film. And as far as, I kind of had these same reservations about putting faith in film and what panel, what would that really be about. I think the thing with us, when we start out to tell a story or a movie or a film, we're just looking for, what is a great story? And I mean, just doing that is hard enough on its own. I think you can run into trouble when you try to force something into a film, such as faith. So I think if it is inherent with the story, which our first film was a true story, and this was based off of, testimonies of true stories, then it's okay, because, that's, part of the human experience, like Jim was talking about, and it's a natural thing. So I think for us, it's just focusing on telling a great story, and, some of those things just happen to show up in those. And then also, we've chosen international films. We're doing narrative stories, so we're going over to, our first one was in Colombia, a true story about a kid who joins a gang. He gets an assignment to kill someone, and as his initiation, we kind of explore his true story, an incredible story. And that was in deadCENTER last year. It was great. It's great to be back here with Paper Flowers again. So I think, there's always a challenge, especially being an American, going into a community and trying to tell their story. So there's tons of challenges, but I think, empowering local filmmakers on the ground. We did all Colombian cast and crew, all Japanese cast and crew. So, that was really exciting, and there's just tons of challenges with that. But I think, when you set out to do a film, to do something challenging like that, it's just so rewarding to come out on the other side. So, our film is Paper Flower. If you missed it, it shows again tomorrow at 3 o'clock at the IO Gallery. So,
Andie, why don't you go next, Andie? What do the ladies think about faith in film?
What do the ladies think about? Well, being the lady, I'll speak for my gender. When we set out to do Paradise, I'm hearing the same kinds of things. You want to tell a good story, and as a writer, that's my job, is to tell a good story. The story that we told had faith elements, and my faith is pretty liberal, and not at all fundamentalist, and so. That was but at the same time, I didn't want to tell a story in a way that turned off anybody. I wanted it accessible to everyone, regardless of whether they had faith or not. So that was a challenge, and I hope we made that. I hope we did that. The biggest challenge, I think, is to be authentic and to not take time out for a sermon where you're sermoning at somebody and telling them this is how it is. So for me, that was really critical, just being really, really real and connecting with other people. So, and just like you said, telling a good story and also, when I was doing the research for Paradise, the film is about a young woman who leaves a cult group, and she moves in with these two kind of hippie slackers, and one of them's an atheist. And one of them's kind of agnostic and doesn't really care one way or the other. But what's interesting, but they're vested in their belief system. And so when I was doing the research for the film, I talked to about, I think it was 18 different cult groups, and talked to over 100 people. What was interesting is their experiences of what we term spiritual abuse were the same over and over and over again. These stories, regardless of the group, regardless of the doctrine, it was all very top down, you're in or you're out, us versus them, I think you mentioned. It was very much, they're evil and we're good. And these people were being controlled. And then they would leave these groups, and they would have nowhere to go. And so I was really invested as a writer in making sure that I got the story right, because I wanted to honor what had happened with these folks, because they'd really suffered. And so the challenge was to tell a good story, to honor people, and to keep it real. And I think Storme did a really good job of directing that movie. So.
And then Storme introduced. This is Storme Wood. He's the director of Paradise Recovered.
Yeah, do you just want me to? Yeah, everybody here, like when Jim was speaking and Brent, I echo, what Jim said. So he said a lot of how I feel about film, and when Andie brought me the script to Paradise Recovered, it's the best of you know, what film can be for me, because it tells an honest story about being human, and it comes at it from two, you know, political different sides of the spectrum, but in the end, it shows how close together we all really are, regardless of where we think we're coming from. That none of us is really that far apart from the other, if we're just willing to put down our guards and have an honest discussion. And so that's really what attracted me, you know, to her script, because it was so honest, and we tried really hard to tell the truth as best we could, and to, you know, hopefully to let the audience be able to, you know, take that in and make up, you know, draw their own conclusions. Because I think, you know, some of the best things that film can do is, you know, raise questions and, you know, let you answer them for yourselves, rather than us tell you what we think or how we feel about it. But can really do that by telling a story, and that connects with us on a human level, because we're all, you know, human. Yeah.
Sorry.
Still writing for you. So we've got about 6 minutes. So why don't we take some questions?
Yeah. I really got a great deal out of your film, and very often when you write something, and it's most important to think about the audience. And if you were not writing this for the audience in Oklahoma, but for those who are involved in the peace process, what would have changed? And if not, how can you get this message to that audience?
The first place we showed the film was both on Bet Jala, and then in Israel. So they were the first audience, and we made it with them. I mean, as Brent had shared, we're embedded. It's just a few of us from here, and it's really their community and their support that makes the film possible. So we weren't even thinking about an Oklahoma City audience, aside from the fact that we knew there'd be a lot of sensitivities toward, the traditional U.S., more church-based audience being more sympathetic to the Jewish narrative, to really understanding kind of that connection. We knew that that would probably be something that we would have face some questions about, but since that's the culture I came from, I brought those questions into the process. I think you drive at something much deeper in your question. You're talking about, wow, how can this is a profound message, the way these guys are living. How can that be shared on a global level, a greater level? How can it even impact maybe what's going on there in this broader community? Well, the deadCENTER's helping. You know, film festivals are helping. You know, we're looking for distribution on a broader level for it to get it done. There's something else behind what you said. I don't have a lot of faith or a lot of trust in the political forces and processes that are at work, especially in the Middle East. It is an incredible sand trap. I found myself as a filmmaker just getting stuck in the mud all the time and just getting dragged down one rabbit trail after another, one burden after another. You could never satisfy that you were hearing the pain of the Israeli audience enough. You could never satisfy that you're understanding the Palestinian plight enough. And both sides really wanted it to represent their pain and be about them. So even then it wasn't that well received there, because it didn't decisively pronounce one side's right or wrong, and they had a problem with that. But I knew that they were going to. But the nonviolent people, which are really the bigger picture behind here, and that's the bigger picture about nonviolence, and that's maybe a great comment about film. It isn't the political forces. It isn't the powers at work. It's the everyday people. Because what happens with nonviolence in the Middle East is you hear that your neighbor is being nonviolent. You hear that your neighbor is being strong. You hear what Yonatan's story is. And all of the Palestinians, the one person they love in this film more than anyone else is Yonatan Shapira. Because it's an Israeli. It's the other that's identifying with their point of view. All of the Jewish and Israeli people in the audience, who they love is Sami Awad, because they haven't really heard too much from the Arab world that empathizes with the Holocaust, and a lot of people deny that. So So they think, wow, here's what we see as an enemy actually reflecting our point of view. Well, that happens on a one-on-one, individual level. So what I love about the film, what I love about the movement, what I think answers your question is that if more people see it and more people catch it and more people take personal responsibility, nonviolence has always been a movement within the people. And that's our hope. Does that? And what can film do? If a film is well told and it inspires that, I think it can be a catalyst for that. So what I hope happens is that this little kindling of nonviolence in the Middle East gets a little bit of wind and a brush fire hits it, and then it spreads over here, and then they say, here's this film, and they pass it over there, and pretty soon the blaze is a lot bigger.
Well, I think we're going to wrap it up right here. The good news is all 3 of their films play tomorrow. And the great news is their film plays next right here. So you don't even have to get up unless you need to use the bathroom. So thank you to all 3 of you. And please check out all 3 of their films are playing tomorrow. It's Paper Flower, Little Town of Bethlehem, and Paradise Recovered. You can see it in the program right out front. And thanks for supporting deadCENTER Film Festival.